15 minutes, the time of a brief meal, the time of a casual conversation. For Sapphira, they were the 15 most crucial minutes of her entire existence, though she didn't know it. Somewhere in Jerusalem, her husband Ananias had just fallen lifeless before the apostles, but the news hadn't yet reached her ears. Fate granted her this brief interval, a final opportunity to choose between truth and deception, a last chance to save her own life. What happens when someone lies not just to men but also to the Spirit, who knows all things? What occurs when the first Christian community, united in purpose and heart, faces its first great internal betrayal? Sapphira's story confronts us with uncomfortable questions about integrity, consequences, and the price we pay for our seemingly private choices. In these fateful 15 minutes, we see the portrait of an ordinary woman facing an extraordinary choice, a decision that would determine not only the end of her earthly life, but would echo through the centuries as a powerful warning. This isn't just a story about sudden death, but about the nature of community, trust, and the sacred commitment to truth. This story reveals a perspective on the gravity of dishonesty that few know, how in a world where lying is frequently minimized, the Bible presents us with one of the most severe examples of the value of absolute truth. It was the dawn of Christianity in Jerusalem. The air in the ancient city vibrated with a different energy. After Jesus' resurrection and the event of Pentecost, something extraordinary was happening in the stone streets of the holy city. Small groups gathered in homes, sharing meals, prayers, and a sense of purpose that transformed complete strangers into family. Imagine a community where no one was in need. Like a large extended family, the first Christians created a radical system of sharing. Those who owned lands or properties voluntarily sold them and brought the money to the apostles' feet. This wasn't forced communism, but a spontaneous act of generosity driven by a deep sense of brotherhood. In this setting lived Ananias and Sapphira, an ordinary couple, probably middle-aged, integrated into the growing community of Jesus' followers. They weren't leaders or prominent figures in the scriptures. They were people like any of us, with desires for belonging, respect, and admiration. They lived in a society where social status mattered enormously. A person's reputation was their most valuable asset, especially in such a tight-knit community. The desire to be seen as generous, pious, and committed was a powerful force in the social psychology of the time. The Roman Empire dominated the known world. Oppression was constant, taxes were high, and life was uncertain. For many, especially for those with some property, like Ananias and Sapphira, financial security represented essential protection against the whims of an unpredictable world. The early Christian community existed within this context of economic and social pressures. The decision to sell properties and share resources wasn't trivial. It meant giving up security in a world without social safety nets. The internal conflict that Ananias and Sapphira faced was deeply human. They wanted to be seen as generous and committed, to receive the same recognition that other members received, but they also wished to maintain a private financial reserve. They were divided between the desire for spiritual status and the perceived need for material security. This tension between appearance and reality, between public generosity and private caution, placed them on a dangerous path. A path that would culminate in the briefest and most dramatic story of judgment in the book of Acts. It all began with a seemingly simple decision. Ananias and Sapphira owned a piece of land. Like many others in the community, they decided to sell it. The sale was completed, and the money placed in their hands. It was at this moment that the first dangerous thought arose in their minds. What if we keep part of the money for ourselves? The idea didn't seem so serious at first. After all, it was their property. No one forced them to sell it. No one forced them to donate everything. The contribution was voluntary. Perhaps they rationalized that they were just being prudent, saving a little for hard times. But then came the second idea, much more dangerous than the first. Let's say we're donating everything, like the others have done. It was at this critical moment that they crossed the invisible line. It was no longer just about the money. It was about presenting a false image. It was about receiving recognition and respect for a sacrifice they weren't really making. The conspiracy needed to be perfect. Ananias and Sapphira discussed the details in whispers, perhaps at night when they were alone. They agreed on the story. They rehearsed their expressions. They decided how much they would keep and how much they would give. They agreed to maintain the secret at all costs. Morning came, clear and ordinary, with no premonition of the approaching tragedy. Ananias woke up, got dressed, and separated the money. One part would go to the apostles, to feed widows, help orphans, support the growing community. The other part was carefully hidden. "I'll be back soon," he must have said to Sapphira. "Remember what we agreed on?" Sapphira nodded. Perhaps there was a moment of hesitation, a fleeting instant when she could have changed the course of events. But the moment passed. Ananias walked through the streets of Jerusalem toward the place where the apostles met. The weight of the money bag in his hand was perhaps lighter than expected, but the weight in his heart was certainly much heavier. Arriving at the meeting place, Ananias found Peter and the other apostles. The room was full of followers, perfect for the public recognition he so desired. With a theatrical gesture, he placed the money at Peter's feet. "This is the total amount from the sale of our property," he announced, probably expecting smiles of approval, words of gratitude, admiring looks from those present. Instead, he met Peter's penetrating gaze. A strange silence took over the room. Peter wasn't looking at the money, but directly into Ananias's heart. "Ananias, why has Satan filled your heart to lie to the Holy Spirit and keep back part of the price of the land?" The words fell like stones. Ananias felt the blood drain from his face. How could Peter know? No one was present during the sale. No one but Sapphira knew their plan. While it remained, was it not your own? And after it was sold, was it not in your own control? Why have you conceived this thing in your heart? You have not lied to men but to God. The public revelation of his lie was devastating. In an instant, the entire facade crumbled. There would be no more admiration, only shame, not recognition, but exposure. Ananias's body reacted before his mind could even process what was happening. His legs weakened, his vision darkened. One moment he was standing, the next, fallen to the ground, without warning, without previous illness, without visible injury. Ananias simply fell dead. The shock was immediate. Cries of surprise filled the room. Some ran to help him, but it was too late. A deep fear descended upon all those present. This was no coincidence. This was judgment. Young men rose, wrapped the body in cloths, and carried it out. The burial would be immediate. According to Jewish custom, there would be no time for an elaborate wake. There would be no time to inform Sapphira. And so, while her husband's body was being carried to the grave, Sapphira remained at home, unaware of the tragedy. For her it was just another morning. Perhaps she was tidying the house, perhaps planning how they would use the hidden money, perhaps struggling with small pangs of guilt she was trying to ignore. The minutes passed. 1, 5, 10. The community was in shock, processing what they had witnessed. No one thought to send a message to the wife, or perhaps amid the confusion, they assumed someone had already done so. 15 minutes, the approximate time it took to take Ananias's body and prepare it for burial. The time that passed before Sapphira, concerned about her husband's delay, decided to go meet the apostles. On her walk to the meeting place, Sapphira had no idea she was walking toward her own judgment. She didn't know her husband was already dead. She didn't imagine she was about to face the same fatal choice. Meanwhile, in the meeting house, the atmosphere was still one of astonishment. Conversations were in whispers. Fear was palpable. It was into this charged environment that Sapphira entered, looking for her husband, completely oblivious to what had happened. When Sapphira crossed the threshold, she was greeted by strange looks, pale faces, tense expressions. Something had happened, but no one seemed willing to speak. Confused, she searched for her husband among those present. It was Peter who broke the oppressive silence. Rising, he walked toward her. There was no accusation in his face, only a deep sadness and an unwavering determination for truth. "Tell me," Peter asked, "did you sell the land for this price?" He pointed to the money, still visible where Ananias had left it. This was the crucial moment of the entire narrative. the moment few biblical commentators explore in depth. This was the instant when Sapphira received something her husband didn't have an opportunity to confess. Peter didn't ask if they had kept back part of the money. He didn't directly accuse her of lying. He simply asked about the sale price, a seemingly innocent question that opened the door to honesty. What happened in Sapphira's mind at that moment? Did she hesitate? Did she realize the gravity of the situation from the looks around her? Did she feel a momentary impulse to tell the truth? If such thoughts passed through her mind, they were quickly suppressed. Committed to the story agreed upon with her husband, not knowing he had already faced the consequences, Sapphira made her choice. Yes, she responded firmly, that was the price. What Sapphira didn't know, and this is one of the most significant revelations of this story, is that she wasn't simply reaffirming a previous lie, she was making an independent decision. Her husband had already made his choice and faced judgment. Now it was her turn. This crucial detail shows that the divine judgment on Ananias and Sapphira wasn't merely about a single act of dishonesty, but about a deliberate conspiracy to deceive, maintained even when offered a chance for redemption. Another rarely discussed aspect of this story is the impact it had on the early community. After the deaths of Ananias and Sapphira, the book of Acts reports that great fear came upon all the church. This wasn't a paralyzing fear but a reverent fear that led the community to take more seriously both God's holiness and the integrity of their own actions. The case of Ananias and Sapphira marked a turning point in the early church. It was the first documented internal crisis, the first case of explicit hypocrisy, the first test of how the community would handle falsehood in its own ranks. The severe divine reaction established a clear precedent. The new community of faith would not be built on appearances, but on radical truth, not on impressing others, but on genuine giving. Few also observed the deliberate contrast that Luke, the author of Acts, establishes between Ananias and Sapphira and Barnabas, mentioned just before. Barnabas also sold a field and brought the money to the apostles, but without pretense, without deception, without seeking status. The contrast couldn't be clearer. This juxtaposition reveals that the problem wasn't in the amount donated. Ananias and Sapphira could freely have donated only part of the value and told the truth. The problem was in trying to appear more generous than they really were, to obtain the prestige of sacrifice without making the complete sacrifice. There's also a rarely noted parallel with another New Testament story, that of the rich young ruler. When confronted with Jesus' call to sell everything and follow him, the rich young man went away sad, but at least he went away honestly. He didn't pretend an obedience he wasn't willing to give. In contrast, Ananias and Sapphira wanted the reputation of total commitment without the real cost. Another surprising aspect is the swiftness of judgment. In most biblical narratives, God demonstrates immense patience before executing judgment. Here, however, the consequence was immediate. This exceptional severity underscores the importance of honesty and integrity for the newly formed community. The specific timing is also significant. The church was just beginning. Standards were being established. Corruption at the core of the first Christian community could have compromised the entire nascent movement. To discover more fascinating stories like this, simply subscribe to the channel, where we explore the enigmas and hidden lessons in biblical narratives, revealing their deepest and rarely discussed layers. After Peter confronted Sapphira with the truth, "How is it that you have agreed together to test the Spirit of the Lord? Look, the feet of those who have buried your husband are at the door, and they will carry you out." The Bible describes the same sudden fate. She fell at his feet and died. The young men came in, found her dead, carried her out, and buried her beside her husband. The story of Sapphira and Ananias traverses the centuries to confront us with an uncomfortable question: how often do we build facades to appear better than we really are? In an age of social media and carefully curated lives, their story resonates with astonishing relevance. Those fateful 15 minutes between Ananias's death and Sapphira's arrival represent much more than an interval of time. They symbolize the space that exists between our private choices and their public consequences, the space between who we really are and who we pretend to be. What makes this story so disturbing isn't just the severity of the judgment, but its specific target. It wasn't murder, it wasn't violence, it wasn't idolatry that brought such consequence. It was dishonesty in the community of faith. It was the corrosion of trust in a group that depended entirely on it to function. In every significant human relationship, be it marriage, friendship, family, or spiritual community, honesty forms the indispensable foundation. When that foundation is compromised, the entire structure is at risk. Ananias and Sapphira didn't understand that they were undermining the very foundations of the community they wished to impress. Perhaps the most tragic aspect of this story is how unnecessary their lie was. No one forced them to sell the property. No one forced them to donate everything. The option to be completely honest was always available. They could simply have said, "We sold our land and would like to donate this portion to the community." This is a powerful reminder that many times the lies we tell are completely unnecessary. They arise not from true needs, but from our desire to be perceived in a certain way. Living in truth is simpler, though it may seem more difficult initially. Truth doesn't need to be remembered, coordinated, or rehearsed. It doesn't require constant vigilance against slips or revelations. Sapphira's 15 minutes ultimately represent the opportunity we all have to choose integrity, even when it costs our pride, our image, or our perceived security. This ancient narrative confronts us with an eternal truth. We cannot live divided between appearance and reality, between public performance and private decisions. Integration, being the same person in all contexts, is the path to inner peace and authentic relationships. The death of Ananias and Sapphira remains one of the most severe episodes in the New Testament, precisely because truth, trust, and authenticity are fundamental to any functional human community, and especially to a spiritual community. When we look beyond the shock of the consequences, we find a profound affirmation of the value of radical honesty, an affirmation that relationships based on truth are more important than status, appearances, or even temporary security. In the end, Sapphira's story leaves us with a simple but challenging question. What kind of person are you in those 15 minutes? When no one is looking, when only you know the truth, when you have the chance to choose between integrity or appearance, what is your choice? Truth, however difficult it may seem in the moment, offers the only sustainable path to a life of inner peace and authentic relationships. This is the enduring lesson of those crucial 15 minutes in the life and death of Sapphira.